Now, this man here, Con O'Neill, some of you may have known him. He would be recognised as one of the greatest of local historians. He was from up at Trimmer, and Trimmer was a very important place for us, as we'll see later. Little town land between Fermoy and Carrickmore. And he was a man, he died there about 10 years ago, and he was about 85, I think. He was born about, I think, about 1910. But it wasn't even his great age. He was a man, even though he was a farmer, he didn't spend much time at the farming. He had a great interest in the local history, probably even to the detriment, my father would have said, of his farm. But he kept the old traditions, and he was the man that I went to from 1980 and wrote down many, many things that he said. And they didn't seem to make much sense, but I was very lucky. I went to him at least 3 times a year for about 25 years. Kept the old notebooks, and they have proved invaluable now, because, as I said, I didn't know the past generations because they were gone. He gave a lot of them to me, but I had to take a lot of it on trust. Now, this is this is the story of Tally the miner. One of the problems we had was that a lot of our people didn't stay here. They went to America, and a lot of people who went to America, they went to America through England, and that made it more difficult to trace them again. My grandmother's side, she was Tally. It was a good name to trace back because there are hardly any Tallys anywhere. It was a very, very rare name. Used to be, I used to look them up in the old telephone directories. There was only one then in Ireland, and they were the one that you would know in Galway. So it was a good name, very, very small family. So if you found a Tally, you know, you would think you're onto something. This Tally that we knew about, as a young man, it was her brother, he had gone out to America. And we knew that, like many of the locals, he went out to the big explosion in mining in the Midwest. And we knew that he'd been somewhere down in Denver or somewhere down there, but he was, anyway, he was lost, contact was lost with him. So I worked a good bit out in America, worked down in South Dakota. You may know Raymond Elliott, we would have known him. We worked just down beside him in that wild country down there. And one night, I was down in that area, I was coming to the town of Rapid City in South Dakota. And you may imagine my excitement when I saw this place in front of me here. And it's called Tally's Restaurant. You know? And we knew that he had gone out to the mining, he'd gone out after gold. So, you know, this looks like my man, you know. And we had to wait till the next morning till the place opened up. We went in there, we got our breakfast the next morning. It was a big restaurant and full of people. And, you know, how do you take it forward? I asked some people, you know, who's the boss here? And you looked up at the door, the 2 people looking after the money, old man and old woman. That's the boss up there. So we went up to them, and I said to him, I told them what I was about. You know, I said I was looking for lost relatives out here. I didn't want to be too upfront. And I said, this friend of ours, he was a miner. Oh, he says, my old man was a miner. I said, he was? Yeah.
Along the front goes. One was 2 chairs there.
So I said, he said, yeah, he said, he was a miner. He said, where are you from? I said, from Ireland. Oh, he said he worked for all those Irish lads. I said, he did? Yeah, he said, he did. He said, and he said, we started up this place, we did very well, he said. And I said to him, well, what part of Ireland did you come from or that? He says, I didn't come from Ireland, I came from Italy. I'm Magatali. He says, those Irish boys called him Tally. So you can see how wrong he can be by jumping to a conclusion. He was a Magatalist, and he adopted the name Tally, so he call themselves Tally today. So, yeah, you know, in this business of traditional relatives, you follow many dead-end trails like that. And you have to be careful and follow the true record. And the truest record is not the record that's written down, which mostly is true. It's the one that's inside your body, which is your DNA, and I'll explain about that later. That's the truest record. Now, America is very important for us to follow. If you're looking for your relatives, America is the place to go. Not because a lot of them have made money and you know, are willing to put money back into this place, the same as happened here. But in America, the people who claim Irish roots are 50 million people are claiming Irish roots. Only 5 million of us here. So 10 to 1 of us are in America. We're not here. And you go all these false impressions. I always thought, for example, that the Irish in America, most of them are Irish Catholics. They're not. 52% of them, only 48% of them are Catholic. And the reason for that is, as you know, the Presbyterians had to leave this country at least 100 years before we left, before the Catholics left. And if 2 went out then, 100 years later, there were probably 16 or 18, and there were many less of them went. But that is why the Irish in America are, you know, are 50 million, and that is where your relatives you'll find a lot of your lost relatives. And as you've seen, that happened to us. We found that. Now, this picture here, what's the relevance of that? I just spent a little while on this. That was a discovery made down at Carlin corner there, you know, down the Crookston Road, just beside Donaghmore. And that is a construction made by the people who lived in Donaghmore. They also lived here, I'm sure, 4,000 years ago, 2,000 years before the time of our Lord. There's people living there who were able to make a construction like that. And that really was the Podge Quins of its day, the Crann Inn of its day. That was a large communal cooking pot. And what happened, they lined that with timbers, and then they lined it with clay, and they filled it with water, and they threw in stones into it. They put a big fire beside it, they threw the stones in the fire, and they picked them out and rolled them into that, and the water was boiling in that. And then they put the timbers across, some of them had sunk into the bottom, and they hung in bags of meat, and they cooked their meat. That's the Irish name for it at the top there. And that was something that, you know, people around here were doing 4,000 years ago. Now, I'm not going to spend too long on 4,000 years ago. I'm going to move forward to here, to 1250. Now, that has a lot of significance for us, for our family. And when I say our family, I mean a lot of your families. Because we weren't around in this area 4,000 years ago. We were, if we were anywhere in Ireland, we were way up in the very top corner there. We're outside Derry City. And the black arrow shows what happened. Around 1250, our family, the O'Neills, moved down into where they ended up in 1250 in Dungannon. They moved to Dungannon, and they took other families with them, and they pushed out the people who were there. Just put it basic, that's what they done. They pushed out the families who were there, and they came to Dungannon. And you can see the map of 1250. You know, it's half of Ireland, the shaded area on the map there, this part of it here, this whole part of Ireland is shaded red. That part of Ireland, it says here, is under area obedient, area obedient to England. You know, that was that long ago. And it wasn't totally under English control, because England wasn't under one monarch then either until after Henry VIII, really. So that was at that time there. So the O'Neills came down and they settled here. There is the mid-Ulster area, and as I say, they pushed out the peoples who were there at that time. Now, this is a map I don't think any of you would have seen before. If you look at it for a little while, you'll begin to recognise it. This is Lough Neagh, and it's one of the first, I think possibly the first map of any detail of this whole area. It's part of East Tyrone, and this is a very, very, very valuable map for this area. And I'm not going to spend long on it. It was a map that I got in London, and this is a copy of it here, and I'm not going to go into it other than I'm going to leave it with you for your society. Leave it for your own records here, and you can have a look at it later. The orientation of the map, we are used with the north of the map being up here, but it's not. You can see over here. You see it's turned right round. It's swung right round. It's turned through 90 degrees. There is, we are up here north of Lough Neagh, and it should be turned right back, but that's the way the map was drawn. So that's the first map of this area. It's very, very important map because it shows a lot of things around this area that were never shown before, and a lot of it is pictorial, like this. That's Tullyhog there, and it's a picture of what was happening at Tullyhog, and the map is from 1590. It's in London. The original of it is in London, and it'll form a lot of discussion with you later, but we'll pass on to it. Now, we were very lucky in our family in having old rental records like these here, because what happened with our own family, the O'Neills settled in around this area, around Donmore, Dungannon, that, and they didn't join up. A lot of the O'Neills ended up after the plantation with land. After 1610, the year of the plantation, the O'Neills had nearly all of their land around here. They weren't put out, despite what people thought. And there was a good reason for that. And the reason for it was they didn't side with Hugh O'Neill. They did in very late years. They didn't side with Hugh O'Neill because they didn't look upon Hugh O'Neill as the true leader. Hugh's father, as some of you know, was illegitimate, and Shane's sons, Shane O'Neill's sons, thought they were the true leaders. So a lot of the O'Neills in this area, and they were left with their land. So all of the O'Neill families after the plantation nearly were left in situ. But after then the 1641 rebellion, the nearly all were moved out, and they were moved. Where did they move to? They moved up, they pushed out, and they moved up mostly to the hill areas, and that's why our family settled at Trimmock outside Plumroy. And after and they settled there at 1650, around 1650, and they moved then down when the Larrys opened up below Plumroy, the townland of Tandragee. The Larrys came there in 1725, and we were so lucky to get these land records, rental records, going back to 1725. And the O'Neills were one of their tenants in the townland of Tandragee. And this shows the rental income from it here. So we spent from 1725 onwards in Tandragee, just below Plumroy. And then this picture here would tell a very sad story for the family. It would tell the story. Here our ancestor at the time, from 1812, he was an old man. His name is marked out. And the reason for that is he was evicted. And we were lucky to get the eviction papers. And a lot of people were evicted here. This was the Napoleonic Wars had finished, and this area was in collapse. The war with France was over. England had won the war, but the country collapsed after it. And they were not able, as we'll see in the next slide, this is a letter here where the landlord agent is saying, June 18 and 14, nearly impossible to collect money from anyone because of poverty. Queen got only £86, a fraction of the total. So they couldn't pay their rent, so they were evicted. And then they went from there down below Donoughmore to where my grandfather and great-grandfather were. So I'll leave that just for a moment. Go on to the next one. Now, this is where I'm going to sit into the DNA now. That's just a general overview of our family. It was this man here started me on DNA. Going back to the American thing again, you have no need to tell you people about the number of American presidents that claim descent from around the north of Ireland in particular. This man, McCain, 2 years ago everyone thought he was going to be the next president, right? And the McCains don't get hung up on the spelling, because the spellings can be C or a K, and it doesn't matter whether it's a Catholic or a Protestant. Nobody could read or write much, beyond say 1860 or that. And when people went to emigrate, they couldn't read or write, and an agent going into the country would say, "What's your name?" and you would say McCain, and is with a C or a K, and he would write whatever he wanted, and you didn't know the difference, and you put down your X. So that's why names changed so much. And spellings were not important in names anyway. The great, the master of the English language, Shakespeare, signed his name in 10 different spellings. So, but we get hung up today on spellings, So, but McCain, they had a very strong, they went very strongly into DNA, the McCains in America. And they found his relative in a little farm away up in North Antrim. About 8 generations ago, I think it was, they had left North Antrim. I went up to the Mellon Folk Park, and I heard this lecture on DNA by this American guy, one of the McCains, and that's why I said, well look, we had hit a stone wall, because we couldn't get back past those records. We couldn't get back, and even getting back to there, once went back about 6 generations, we weren't sure if we were related to those O'Neills or those O'Neills. We thought we probably were, and we had stories, but had no way of proving it. So this is what drove us onto getting onto DNA. Now, this was the second thing that drove us onto DNA, and it was it's a rare thing you get it. There was a guy called Desmond O'Neill. His name's on that. Desmond O'Neill, I knew Desmond very well. He'd been in engineering like myself, but 18 years ago, he's now 83, he retired, sold his business up in Clonus, and he went into a full-time study of his family, and he produced this book, and it's just unreal. This book has so many genealogies of the O'Neill, and that was invaluable to us. That book, it tied up some of the things we already knew, but he put so much time into it, and the poor man, just about a year after he completed it, he took dementia, but it's just an invaluable thing. So that book and this DNA thing, I had to start investigating where did these O'Neills go. Now that brings me back to the big stone again. Just go to the next one, Martin, there. On to the next maybe. No, go back. Just go back. Right. You remember, it mightn't be easy for you getting back to it. There's a big stone in Donoughmore, like the big stone that's at the front of the, I think it's the Presbyterian Church in Caulfield. And go back to the next one. And it's this stone here. It's an obelisk, what they call it. You know, there's a man from Caulfield, he died in Canada, I think I'm right in saying. And he put up one of these stones to himself. He died at the same time. Now, that stone there is worth a reading because it shows that this family, who left Donoughmore in 1830, were descended, and we knew of them, were descended from Q O'Neill. Now, nobody believes that because Q O'Neill, the man who, the Flight of the Earls man who we heard so much about last year, his branch of the family died out in 2 generations after him. There was one son, like, because, you know, the O'Neills were quite, you know, they're quite ruthless people, you know. So he went ahead and he left one of his sons, he was a young son. He left him behind, he left him here. He left him in Caulfield. So he went away and he was Con. So they claimed descent from Con. But the records state that Con was found, he was captured because he was too much of a risk to leave around, and he was taken to Dublin Castle and nothing more was ever heard of him. So we don't reckon that he ever came out of prison. And none of them, the older O'Neills would have believed these people were descended from a Q O'Neill's branch. But they always claimed to be the O'Neill, and old Willie Moores, who some of you may have known, a very old man, blacksmith for generations. The blacksmith at the siege of Derry, old Willie Moore, he knew the family way back, and they always called themselves the King O'Neills. So, anyway, the last of them left Donoughmore and went to Dundee, like a lot of people around here, in 1830. You know, things had started to improve. You remember I said 1812, 15 was a disaster. A lot of the Irish went to Dundee. Actually, in 1830, 20% of the people of Dundee were Irish born. So they went to Dundee, and we found out all about him from that stone. And I wanted to find out more about him because Father Devlin, who had been a great local historian, said this man was a load of rubbish because he hadn't a true descent, because he couldn't have been descended from Q O'Neill. And he said as well, if we read the writing on the stone, there was one of them, a whole set of the family, it gives about 6 sets of the family, was born, all of them were born after the father died. You know, he said that's rubbish. But I knew that couldn't have been rubbish. That had to be a mistake, because no one would be so stupid if they wanted to do something like that, that I put it right. But I couldn't prove it. And he said as well, he said, no Irishman would put a stone that shape up over his grave. But I didn't pass much remarks on that. We found out from an old cousin of ours living in Scotland that William O'Neill had died. William O'Neill had died, and he was living in Dundee. So in about 1980, I went over to Dundee, and I found out, I came into Dundee one evening and I found out he had been the Lord Provost of Dundee, so he'd done very well. He was a guy who had made an awful lot of money. This man knew his history here. What had happened to him, he went out with the father as a young boy, and we think he had been at the Royal School. We're not sure, there are records of him, we think it's him. And he went out there and he became a doctor of sorts, or whatever kind of, but anyway, what happened, the big thing, you people who are farmers long ago would remember, all our meal came in jute, and all the jute bags came from Dundee. And jute was a terrible thing because it brought in from India, it brought in cholera. And cholera used to break out often. And cholera broke out in Dundee a few years after he qualified. And he got a cure for cholera. And the people came flocking to him. And he cured cholera. And the cholera subsided. and life went on again. And then people started to say, oh, maybe he didn't, maybe he didn't, maybe it would have been like the swine flu, it would have gone away or something. But anyway, if that did happen, 5 years after, cholera broke out on a massive scale. It even came to here, came to Dunmore. And broke out on a massive scale, the people remembered and they flocked to him, and he cured them. And he made his fortune at that cure. And as a result of that, the people of Dundee erected this to his memory. That's what this here is. In grateful remembrance of all he had done. So he obviously made his money at that. Now, they didn't know who he was descended from. They believed that he was descended from Hugh O'Neill. So that was 1985. We got onto DNA 2 years ago, and we decided, let's get out to Dundee. Went out to Dundee, we couldn't find him, but we found David and we found Alexander. And Alexander offered to do his DNA, so we did Alexander's DNA. This is the record of this man's genealogy, of that, the O'Neills in the big stone, written in this book. This is the record of it here. And O'Neill did this from records. He didn't do it from old stones. He did it from records. Now, just pass on a marker on to the next one. Oh, no, well, missed some out. You must have missing a few. No, way back. Yeah, back, yeah. Yeah, near, back. That's it. Go forward. Right there. This is it. Let's come to DNA. Every man carries within himself, like an identity card, the X was called the X and the Y chromosomes. Didn't worry too much about them. X and Y. Women only carry an X chromosome. They don't carry the Y chromosome. And back about 20 years ago, using powerful microscopes, this you've heard about the genome and all that. This DNA was discovered, and that's what the DNA looks like under a microscope there. It looks like a barbed wire, really, is what it does. And these little things on it are called markers. And this was first discovered 20 years ago. And as I say, a man can pass on the Y chromosome to his, and he can inherit it from the earlier generations. So my son, for example, should be exactly the same DNA as I have. Exactly the same. Now, here, for example, if the son ends up here with a different Y chromosome, there's a problem. There's a problem of some kind. This man is not his father, right? Just as simple as that, right? It's not his father. So what happens? This is the critical thing. If I was to get my grandfather's DNA, it would be exactly the same as mine. If I was to get the man who came before us 6 generations ago, it would be exactly the same as mine, right? Except, as you go forward, and this is why the DNA is so great, as you go forward, you get what they call mutations or changes. So, the little markers, we look upon, you can have 25 markers or 37 or 67 in the test, and these are the little boxes in which you break the DNA up into. Now, I'm not going to worry about the science of it, I don't know it, but it ends up as a series of numbers, and I'll show you mine in a minute. It ends up as a series of numbers, and I'll show you mine at 37 markers, there's 37 little boxes, and in each box there is a number. And Martin's have Aidan's. He has 37 boxes, and in each box the numbers are the same as mine. Right? Now, so if we look at this here, if someone, for example, if somebody did what's called a 67 marker, that should be 67 you normally, long ago, used to break it up into 37. Now you'd ask for 67 markers. And you send it away. What to do with it, they send you a little envelope and a little swab. You do it like that inside your mouth, you put it in the envelope and you send it away. It's as simple and as quick as that. And they will send you out back a printout like what I'll show you in a minute. Right? Now, we asked for 67 markers because it's very good detail. And if I had then, if I went back 4 generations and I found someone with a DNA that was only one marker in 67 different from mine, there's a 50% chance that he is the same as me. That's what's called MRCA, most recent common ancestor. 4 generations back, we had the same common ancestor. Like if you're third cousins, that man where you all came from, 4 generations back. If you wanted to be dead sure, if you're 1 marker different, 8 generations back, you're 90%, or that's as good as 100. So that's why the DNA enables you to link in with other families of different lengths. As we move on a little bit, now here we are here. This is the O'Neills here. This is myself here. Not easy for you reading them there. That's Pat, and that's my son Aidan. Now, I don't know if you can see them there. I can assure you that the numbers in each box, and there are 37 boxes. You see, we used to do 12 markers long ago, and then 25, 37. The number in each box for Aidan and me is exactly the same. So I'm happy and he's happy. So, why the red? Why the red saying? You know, that's going back to what I said a minute ago. This thing here, which is good. There, I have to get down and see it. I don't know what that says. I can't read it. Oh yeah, no, cannot worry about him. This one here is what the scientists in our family called the O'Neill family, the general name O'Neill. They reckon this is the markers. This is the DNA of Shane O'Neill. That's going back 500 years ago. That is his DNA, right? That's his DNA. Now, we are different here, one, and we're different in another one here. And so we have mutated and gone out from the line. But we're only 2 different. But if we look at this one here, here's another one here. This is another friend of us. He's the grandson of this man. He's Aaron O'Neill. It's an old biblical name. Aaron is, he's supposed to be the same O'Neill as us, but look, he hasn't the same DNA. But he has the same DNA except there. He has 1 change, right? He's a 10 there, and 10 is, 11, sorry. We're a 10. But we have found out that by doing another, it's here actually, by doing another second cousin of ours, that the 11, he was 11, so we have changed to be a 10 within the last 2 generations. This is a man called Pat O'Neill, be a second cousin of mine. He's about 92 or 3. You might know him. So this is a recent change. So we really are nearly the same as him. So there's a 90% sure chance that we are related to him 8 generations ago. And it could be more than that. But and we know from the records that we are. So it's just proving the records. Now, this is very important here. Very important for us, this old guy here. He was called the Latin teacher. He lived in 1839 to 1912. He'd been studying to be a priest and he'd left for some reason. And he lived up in Trimmock, beside where there was 3 families of O'Neills there then, where our family had come from. You remember at the beginning, and went to Tandragee. And we held from tradition that we were the same O'Neill as him. There was tradition and weren't able to prove it. One day in way back in 1910, this is written in some records we have. My grandfather was coming out of Carrickmore Fair with my father, and they met this old man on the road. And my father stopped with him, and he said to him, he said, "We are a friend of his." Now, a friend is something that's used around this country, around our country anyway. Old people were very exact. You know, they wouldn't talk today about cousins. Then they didn't talk. He was a first cousin, or he was a second cousin, or he was a third cousin. But we had never said fourth cousins, but they'd call them friends. So we always thought he was about that far out from us. But he was very, very important because he was very educated, and there's a big genealogy. It's very well accepted, done up about 1870 by a man called O'Hart, one of the big genealogists in Dublin, and he wrote up these big books of genealogy, and it's way before the Four Court fires, and it has survived, and his genealogy was proven then, and he claimed here direct descent from this man here, Shane the Proud. He claimed direct descent. That was the next generation, down to here he's here, the Latin teacher. He claimed that he was a direct descendant of there, and O'Hart had given the government stamp on it for what it was worth, right? Now, so if we wanted to test him, but unfortunately he was long dead, and his two children, he could only transfer the DNA through his male line, and the son and daughter, they had died. So they were gone. The DNA was gone. Or was it? It wasn't, because when we go back up to here, here is the Latin teacher here. He had a brother. And like most of the people, as I said earlier on, he went to America. And I'll talk about him later. We found him in Philadelphia. He's here in Philadelphia, right? His people are still in Philadelphia. But we didn't know that then when we were doing the DNA. We only learned that this summer. So we looked back here and back here. Now, we knew that he had a brother here, and when we went right down here, Thomas O'Neill, the farmers up there yet, they're living up at Carrickmore yet, and there's Thomas O'Neill there, there's the Latin teacher there, those two guys there, you can see they are two brothers, they are two cousins, they are two second cousins, there's third cousins. He was a fourth cousin really back. So we went to him and went into him, and even though he turned out to be related to us, we had to be careful with him. When we got his DNA, it's no big deal, you know, in a couple of minutes got him, told him what we're about. So we're really interested to see what happens there. Took his DNA, and here is his DNA here. It's exactly the same as the DNA of Shane O'Neill, except in one, where there's one mutation. So what tradition had told us, what he had claimed, DNA is saying he's telling the truth. Now, we move on, Mark, this and action. So that's, I'll just hold it a minute there. Yeah, just at that, go back to that one there. This one here now. We got Alexander's, as I told you, Alexander O'Neill's DNA, and here is it here. Now you can't read all the numbers there. It was we only got up to a 25 marker. It was cost a wee bit more to get the more the more you get broken up, but it proved it scared us when we saw it. But it bore out what we believe, because the old traditions rarely lie. You know, the old history of people have rarely lied. This is saying not only is he not an O'Neill, he's nowhere in the farmyard. He's away. He's a total different kind of native altogether. Look, he's just total covered with red, and this scared us quite a bit, you know. So where do you go from there? He definitely wasn't an O'Neill. There's something wrong. He was not an O'Neill. So we went back
Excuse
again.
me, could I just check just to get my bearings?
Yeah.
The man who was provost of Dundee,
Yes.
is that his son standing beside the stone there?
Yes, I think he is.
And who did you get this, the DNA from?
From a brother of his.
His brother.
A brother of his. Yeah, a brother of his, Alexander. I think there are 4 brothers, Alexander and David and William and James. So we haven't met them very often and very much, but didn't feel like going back to him when we found this here and said to him, look, well, you're not a true O'Neill. It doesn't really matter anyway, you know, but he'd always believed that. So we'll go to our records and we'll go to the Bible here of it and see what it says. And what the records say and is he was a son of Shane O'Neill's. The records say he was a son of Con, who was the first son of Shane O'Neill, right? But, sorry, he was a son of Shane O'Neill, not the son of Con. He was a son of Shane O'Neill, because they're his chiefs. They talk about Henry VIII, you know, been put out of the church for different things. Hugh O'Neill and Shane O'Neill wasn't much different. They married a number of times. And Shane O'Neill's, I think it was his second or third wife, was Anne MacLean. Because they married to protect their property, they married to get, to make alliances and that. So Shane married MacLean of the Isles, one of the MacLeans. And his wife, when he married her, she possibly was married before, I don't know, but she had 2 boys. And O'Neill gave one of these boys his name. And that's what the record says. So they're descended from that child who wasn't an O'Neill, he probably wasn't a MacLean, and that is why the DNA, here's the DNA 500 years later telling the story. You know, it's unbelievable. So if we move on.
So he was a stepson of you.
Well, he was. He says here in the records, and I don't know, and his records are all annotated, you know, and there's references to him. He says he was the bastard son of the woman. So it may have been a child that she had before she married anyone. I don't know. But that yeah. It was a funny thing. They always say that you rarely come up with anything new when you're thinking about something that somebody way over there is thinking at the same time. And this was almost uncanny. When we were doing this DNA, there were 2 other O'Neills had reached the same conclusion as us. One of them was an American family that had lost complete contact with Ireland. And they wanted to find out who they were and what they were. And they were doing their DNA at the same time as us. And this is what happened here. Move on. Yeah. The O'Neills were called the Ram O'Neills. I couldn't believe it tonight when I met up here with a man here tonight who came from the same town land as these people. These people here, I couldn't find out anything about them at all. And when I looked up my old notes, I have about 5 notebooks of notes. My mother had about 2 lines written about them. But old Con O'Neill said, we are the same O'Neills as the Ram O'Neills. And that's all it meant to me. That was way back about 85 or 87. And when I did my DNA, these people were doing their DNA at the same time. And you can see they've come up with almost exactly the same DNA as us. Just 1 point of difference. So DNA is saying you're related 6 to 8 generations back, right? Now, the story of this family is very, very interesting. He came from Lisnastrain. That's just outside between Killidle and Stewartstown. And this was the first man from here, Michael. Michael went to Philadelphia in about 1862, I think it was. He went out to Philadelphia and He was followed shortly after by the whole family, but there were four original brothers of them. And when he went out to Philadelphia, the Irish weren't wanted there. It was like any new breed of people coming in, they weren't wanted. So they started, where do you start? Start at the ground. You start where you can get a job. So they started gathering rags off the ground, right? Now the Irish were soon in big demand in America, because Philadelphia was the centre of the cotton industry in America. And the Irish, having spent generations, as you know, all your grandparents, or great-grandparents anyway, were spinners and weavers, right? In 1820 in this area, the rector in Castle Coffey, he did a great job. He wrote down what the father worked at. 80% of them were weavers. They've been weavers on farmers, right? So the O'Neills were weavers, so there were good people that were working at fabrics. The centre of it, they started gathering rags, because the factories had no windows to keep for the summer to keep it cool. Threw the rags on the streets, and the streets were covered with rags. They gathered the rags, and they graduated from that to washing the rags. They washed the rags, and they were so, you might say, lucky. But what happened in Philadelphia at that time, 1860, the railways were the big thing. The railways were starting, and the railways all started and were all made in Philadelphia. And they went all west from there. So they started selling the rags to oiling the engines. And then they started to take the rags and move it a stage further, and they shredded the rags, and they developed a system of upholstery. And they ended up, within about 25 years, upholstering all the trains that were made in America. They became a very, very wealthy family, and they took the whole family out, and the whole family of them left, and they just kept sending the money back, and they went to Philadelphia in 1860, and if we move on, and they did so very well that in 1900 they came home here looking to buy up any large estate they could get, and they bought up, the only one that they could get at that time was Rohan Estate down at Coal Island. So they bought Rohan Estate, and they kept it for about 30 years. I think it was about 120 acres then. And in 1930 then, they sold it off. They gave it away. They didn't, like Americans, they give it away. And they give it to the Catholic Church on certain conditions. And one of the conditions was it was never to be sold. And they got word in a year's time that it had been sold. So, and that's another story. But anyway, the Ram O'Neills became very, very wealthy, and this was one of their factories, and it's still standing today. It's still standing today. Became very wealthy, but like that's the mill line in 2007. You can still see it today. They became very, very wealthy family, and move on more to the next one. Here is one of them with George Bush. Then there's a big story to this. What happened was there were four brothers of them, and they were businessmen. Two of them married, two of them didn't, and they owned a quarter of the business each. And depression was coming along, and one of them got into a bit of trouble, and one of them signed guarantor for him. And as the descendant today would say, he did a thing that we weren't very proud of, but he did it. He called in his guarantee, and the brother was put bankrupt, and the brother had to clear off. He wasn't going to hang around. And well, they were business first, so they were like friendship was important, and they're very, very friendly crowd. And the two of the brothers had no family, and they died, and one brother ended up owning all of the business, and the fourth brother had it clear. I'll talk about him in a minute. The other one stayed behind, and they have, like a lot of Americans, they made, they give all of their money away in the last generation and put it into a trust fund. And the trust fund's about 500 million. And they live on a salary today. And that's how they are. And the man went to, where did he go? He went to a place that was a wild place at the time, and after the Depression he went down to Texas, and he thought he would start farming. And he bought a bit of land, somehow he got a bit of land, but the land didn't turn out too good, but it was full of oil. Today he's the biggest oil man in Texas. And back in, it's an interesting story, like I just spent 1 minute telling you about it. He was the same age exactly as this man. And in, when George Bush, the last George Bush, he went through a very bad time. He had lost, he was out of the presidency, and his 3 sons were in, 2 of them were in a very bad state. One of them was about to be convicted for financial problems, and another one was a total out and out drunkard, had a very bad problem, and that was George. And O'Neill also was a wild man, and O'Neill had a total conversion. And it became a total, like that's way back at the year George Bush retired from his presidency, first George Bush, and he got married then. This guy's about 6'5", he doesn't look as big there. He got married then, and he invited his best friend George Bush to the wedding, and his wife invited a woman called Laura to the wedding, and George Bush and Laura met at the wedding, and they got married. And George Bush, and he said to Bush, he said, look now, he said, you have to go straight. And he said, what you do now, from now on, I want you to go for the governorship of Texas, and I'll finance you. And he did. And he financed him, and he became the governor of Texas, and he put a lot of money behind him ever since. So that's, after, you know, here he's in the Oval Office of the White House. So, as I say, the DNA brought us close to this family. They've been over there. We're let them move on, Martin, to the next one. This, by the way, here, you've seen this nearly before. This is the O'Neill family grave in Philadelphia. It's just a crazy thing, we would think. It's massive size. All of them are buried there, and it's you know, they must have seen the one in Donoughmore before they left. You know, and move on to the next one. And just before we leave that one, go back again, and just beside that one, just about there, there's one about 2/3 the size of it, and believe it or not, it's the brother of the Latin teacher. We couldn't believe it, and it's an exact. There's different motifs in that, red hands and different things, and one is copied of the other. So they must have established their friendship, and no one they were related out there. But as I said, they'd lost touch completely with Ireland, and it's only last year they made the contact again through the DNA. And what's the next one? And just actually show you, last year they had their gathering together, and I was saying to you, 9 out of 10 of us are in America, and you better believe it. There is the family today. That was their reunion. All O'Neills, and the different colours of the 4 different brothers. 800 of them. You know, 800 of them out in. That was their celebration. They do these things in America. So it's now this one here. This is the result of our DNA, and I hope some of what I've said you can apply, and I know you can apply directly to yourselves. We don't do anything. We work through, it's an American company, they're the biggest in the world. It costs about $150, I think, for you to get your DNA, and it's only worth the getting if you are linked in with others of your name. But when you email them, they will say, oh sure, there's a big branch of Cuddies, or there's a big branch of Hollands or whatever here. And then it's worth doing, because you might find, now this is the original one here we talked about earlier on, the Latin teacher. And this shows here where, I can't see who this is, who's that, sorry? Thomas? Oh, yeah, that shows where the Thomas guy we talked about linked into the main line. And this shows here where, which one's this?
Yeah, that's Ark.
Eh,
In Francis.
That shows us our line here. And one of the great things we had is an old family tradition. We held that there were 5 Franks in direct line. My father was, my brother's number 5, my father, my grandfather, my great-grandfather, my great-great-grandfather. We found them all now, and there's where we link in, we're 90% sure. And then this here is the Ram O'Neills. You see? This tells you where you link in, where you know, it's quite complicated, but we're 90, we say we link in there and here with 90% certainty. 90% not certain, probability. 90% probability. That's what DNA can do for you. And as I say, it's only starting for us, and it could happen for anyone, and it's, as I say, the record is the best record because it's within your body.